Goedemorgen. Volle bak. Zon, geen file. Dat hebben we ook wel eens anders gehad. Ja, Alex heeft eigenlijk alles al gezegd wat ik wilde zeggen. We gaan vooral vandaag kijken wat de toekomst brengt en onderzoeken. En we doen het een beetje positief kritisch. Voor je het weet moet je je entree-fee betalen. Als je hier 3 jaar geleden was geweest, had Second Life nu de wereld moeten veroveren. Hadden we nu allemaal hier ons betaald in Linden-dollars voor de entree. En het is allemaal wat anders gelopen. Dus ook al zijn de sprekers nog zo goed en zijn ze zo visionair, we gaan ze altijd positief kritisch als echte Nederlanders benaderen. Maar er is één man die echt heel bijzonder is, want Jeff Howe van Wired, onze eerste spreker, en ik ga nu even over in het Engels dat hij hoort wat ik over hem verzin. Jeff Howe is the only speaker I've ever heard that really lives the life of his book. Jeff is a senior writer for Wired magazine, which introduced the internet to the mass media. I actually think it was the first magazine in 1993 that wrote about the internet. He's been there for 8 years. A few years ago he started a blog called Crowdsourcing. And he writes about co-creation, how you can use your consumers and collaborators and open up as a company to develop new products and services. But he really tries to crowdsource everything. He crowdsourced the cover of his last book, asked people their opinions. But he also crowdsourced his way into Holland this morning. He was in London last night, asked people in the audience how he could get to Holland. Got a guy to give him a ride. He wanted to sleep in the car over. Got an English guy that gave him a ride over here. Except when they got to Dover, found out that the crowdsourcing Englishman didn't have his passport with him. So Jeff actually paid him for the cab fare back to London, lost money on crowdsourcing, and found his own way here. He slept an hour and a half, but he says that doesn't matter because he has 2 kids, and it's kind of what his average sleeping time is. But please give him a big hand because he's the hardest working guy in show business, Jeff Howe.
Thank you. It's a little surreal being introduced in a language that you don't speak, but yeah, the nightmare of last night is true, but it was more amusing than anything else. And I'm actually really quickly I'm conducting a second crowdsourcing experiment today. If I'm going to have Friday free, tomorrow free, and if anyone is interested in suggesting I should do do with my day driving from here back to London. I have to get a ferry back from Calais to Dover. You can email me at it's my name, Jeff Howe at wiredmag.com, or you can just Twitter me at crowdsourcing. So if anyone has suggestions, I'm a bit of a history buff, so we'll see what the crowd comes up with. I'm assuming a fair amount of knowledge in the Netherlands about crowdsourcing. Is that accurate? How many people have heard of crowdsourcing here? Just about everyone. So a quick definition, just really quickly though, and the one we used when we first came up with the term at Wired, is it's when you take a job once performed by employees and you outsource it to a large, undefined audience, generally through the form of an open call. And that idea of undefined and open call are very important because they're what I think of as sort of the magic ingredients in crowdsourcing. So I want to leap in with sort of the genesis of how the idea came about. And in 2005, I had spent, sorry, getting a little faint. Sorry, heart's racing a bit. I should be fine. I know. It looks more worrying than it is. It's just, it is a bit the lack of sleep. But so I spent the summer of 2005 at Wired working on a piece about MySpace. And at the time, no one really knew of MySpace. Now it's a household word here as well as in America, right? Everyone knows MySpace. Different countries have their different social networking sites, so I'm never sure. But and it was really best known as a place where bands and comedians and models even could circumvent the industry and go directly to the fans. They could build their own fan base, create their own distribution system for their music and their wares, and you know, basically book their own tours. And so this was already having a big impact on the music industry. And so I was writing about it from the industry perspective, but in order to do this, I was spending a lot of time with these musicians. I was specifically going on the Vans Warped Tour, which I think of as sort of a movable punk rock feast, this carnivalesque collection of these bands, up to 50 bands at any one stop, playing on some 6 or 7 stages, and their various you know, sort of carnivalesque hangers-on. And they exemplified what I came to think of as promiscuous creativity, in that they were writing poetry and publishing it and doing web design and illustration and tattoo art and making little videos, and none of it was terribly good. But what I noticed was that they weren't necessarily trying to make it good or trying to become filmmakers or poets or web designers. It was just that they had this tremendous facility with the technology itself. It was that the technology itself had become, in a sense, transparent or invisible in a way that for a digital immigrant, perhaps you've heard this divide between the digital native and the digital immigrant, the latter being anyone who gets their news from a newspaper, and the former, of course, being someone who gets it online, born, say, after 1984, that to them the technology had become like the pencil was to the rest of us. And so all this lodged in my brain basically as something big is coming. And I didn't really know what yet. But about 4 or 5 months later, I was asked to give a presentation, not too much unlike this one, though a much smaller audience. And I was supposed to talk about this MySpace article. I'd written it and, you know, hadn't mentioned any of this. But rather than talk about MySpace, I ditched it. And I spent the night before staying up, typing user-generated instead of user-generated content into Google. Because at the root of what I felt like I'd observed amongst all these kids was that there was something much deeper, something much more fundamental of a phenomenon than just kids making videos. User-generated content was, as it is still, a big term, and I think an unfortunate one, a misleading one. And I found just enough to make me believe that there was something here. And so I gave my speech, and it was very, you know, I'd been up all night. My hair was disheveled, and I'm not sure I made a lot of sense. But I did go back to my hotel room and call my editor, and I said, my nostrils were full of the scent of this story. I said, there's something here, and it's promising, but it's transformational. It's going to be, going to be a threat. It's like, it's a shift like outsourcing was. And he said, it's like outsourcing to the crowd. And I said, or crowdsourcing. And that was the origin of the term. We spent a little bit longer than usual actually researching the article because we really wanted to make sure that there was something to report on, that we weren't just fabricating a trend. So we spent about 6 months working on, I really spent 6 months just researching the piece. And finally I came upon enough examples and robust enough examples, successful enough examples, where I really felt that we could go to press with this and I could feel intellectually honest. If you had Googled the term crowdsourcing about a month before the article came out, then you would have had nothing. There was nothing. A month afterwards, there was some 700,000 entries on Google. So I don't know exactly how that much appeared that quickly, but all I can say is that I've written better articles, so it's not me. But that term, I think that I like to think that other people had the same feeling that I did, that same sort of gut instinct, that we needed a way to describe a phenomenon that was so broad and so diverse. So I want to quickly get into what that phenomenon is and what I think of as what characterizes it. And to do that, I want to talk to you about 3 companies that I think exemplify 3 ideas. And the 3 ideas are democracy and openness and diversity. So the first company, and I know many of you, because I'm used to introducing this great company to people in the United States, but last time I was giving a speech like this, and answer as it happened, I happened to say, well, who's heard of Threadless.com? And almost everyone. Everyone here has heard of Threadless.com, is that safe to say? It's a t-shirt company? Maybe not. I hope not, because it's fun to be able to introduce it to people. Threadless.com got started in 2000. When two design school dropouts, Jacob DeHart and Jake Nickel, met each other in an online t-shirt design competition. Jake Nickel had won. Jacob DeHart had come in second. They discovered they were both living in Chicago, met over beers, and thought, well, why don't we just have this contest all the time? Why wait until the people who run this forum, this sort of online community, decide to hold it? We'll have our own community, and the whole point will be this contest. And so, as a hobby, as a sideline, out of their bedrooms, they start Threadless.com, and they throw up the website, and the idea is that people will submit designs, and there'll be a winner, and that'll get made into a shirt, and the shirt will be sold back to the same people who submitted the designs, and that'll pay for the hosting. And the point all along was really to serve this community. But when it came time to decide who the winner would be, the Jakes, as they came to be known, made a very fateful decision, and that's whereas instead of 10 or 15 years ago, they would have decided themselves, or perhaps gotten some celebrity designer to come in and decide who the winner should be. That they naturally, having grown up on the internet, thought, well, the crowd should decide itself. This is easily done. There's no technological reason not to do this, and there's every logical reason to do this. Well, this radically increased Threadless's popularity because suddenly there was something to do on this community besides designing a shirt. If you couldn't design a shirt, you could always come in and help determine which one was the winner. And people loved to vote. And so Threadless quickly grew from 5,000 to 50,000 to eventually I think the community is around 400,000 people who come and submit their shirts perhaps, but more so they vote on them. And what had started with no intention of ever becoming a business has the last reported earnings in 2006 were some 17 million, and purportedly, although it hasn't been filed, some 30 million US dollars in 2007. So it's an enormously successful company. That's with profit margins of 35%. Not bad for two college dropouts that weren't trying to start a business at all. And it's worth looking quickly what this impulse towards democracy has done for Threadless, what the crowd is doing for Threadless. And the first thing, of course, is that it's providing this core service for the company, right? I mean, what are they selling? They're not selling T-shirts. It's easy to get T-shirts. They're selling very hip designs, and they are. They're really fun. My favorite, actually, not just my favorite, but the best-selling one. It's a picture of Karl Marx and Lenin and Trotsky and so on, stumbling around drunkenly with lampshades on their head, and it's called Communist Party. So, someone has to come up with this, and traditionally, of course, one hired people who would continuously come up with such great ideas. But, the well never runs dry at Threadless. You've got this enormous crowd submitting. But I think really that's just the beginning of what the crowd does. So Threadless has also never spent a dime on marketing or advertising because what they have is a self-evangelizing community. And they've been intelligent enough to, A, show tremendous respect for their community. They always put the community first. And then they make it very easy for community members to bring in more community members. And they offer store credit for becoming part of a street team or for taking a picture of yourself wearing your favorite Threadless t-shirt and submitting it to the site and blogging about it. And so it's really a boon in terms of marketing as well. But the third thing, and I think the most intriguing, is that because of this voting system, Threadless has an incredibly fine-tuned gauge of consumer demand, and because of this, in 8 years, at this point, they they make and sell 90,000 T-shirts a month. Threadless has never had overstock. They've never had a problem with having stock in here. They've never not sold out. They even have a little button on top of each design. Not only can you rate it 1 through 5, traditional system, but you can also click "I'd buy it." And they haven't told me this, but I bet they know exactly what average percentage of people who say "I'd buy it" actually buy it. Let's say it's 40% or something. That's one company, and that's democracy. But I want to talk quickly about openness and another way that crowdsourcing is manifested in very different fields. Stock photography. Do people know of iStock Photo? Hands? Fair number. So what's commonly known about iStock Photo is you can get a photo for $1. What's less commonly known is that, like Threadless, and I think this is important if you're interested in this stuff and in social media, is that, like Threadless, iStock Photo also wasn't started as a business. Bruce Livingstone in 2000 was a web designer, and he had grown tired of paying $300 to create a design when often it was simply the client in question was one of his friends. Punk rock musician, another band, someone that didn't have $300. He was doing the design for free. So Bruce had the thought, well, I know, I'll use my own images. I'm a photographer. I'm a really crappy one, but I'm a photographer. And then he had the thought, well, I could just upload them and I could let other people use my images. And they had the further thought, I could upload them and I could allow them to use my images if they also put their own images up. And in this you see the gift economy that has arisen over the internet, where as you give, then you receive. But the site grew so popular, albeit with a small community of designers, because this was a closed system. You had to be a photographer in order to download. You had to be uploading your own images. In order to be an eater, you had to be a feeder. Bruce made his own fateful decision around 2002. He could no longer afford to pay the hosting costs because the site had hosting all of these images and the immense traffic of the downloading of a high-res image. So he decided, well, heck, I'm just going to open it up and I'll charge $0.25. And this had a transformational effect on iStock Photo, because what happened is suddenly the system was open instead of closed. So suddenly prospective clients discovered, wow, there's this site where instead of $300, I can pay $0.25. Is that possible? And so people flooded to the site. But more than that, photographers discovered that I've never made money off photography. In fact, it's always been a losing game for me. I sink money in to my equipment. Suddenly they learned there's a place where they can make some money. I mean, they don't necessarily need photos. What they need is enough to pay for, their filter or a zoom lens. So iStock Photo also has this, in fact, even, dwarfing Threadless in terms of its success. It's stock photography is crucial in the very short history of crowdsourcing, because it's the first case that we have of a complete industry that's been transformed, a $2 billion industry that is now, at least to a large degree, being created by the crowd. The core product, the photos, are being created by the crowd. Just some quick, boring numbers, but like Threadless, iStock Photo quickly did become a business, and the professionals, after very much sort of aligning in lockstep against this invasion of the amateurs, Getty, which is by far the largest of the stock photo companies, switched in 2006, reversed itself, and bought iStock Photo for $50 million. Smartest decision they've ever made, because as it happens, their core offerings, rights-managed, professionally produced photography, has entered into a steep decline around that time, while iStock Photo began doubling its revenue every year. It marked 72, I think, some 30 million in 2006, 72 million in 2007, and Getty, which actually had to find which did find a private equity firm that bought it this February. Its stock price had slid some 60, 70% over the course of when I was writing the book. Goldman Sachs had done a report that showed that they expect that the rest of Getty's offerings will continue to slide, while iStock Photo will climb to $260 million in revenues by 2012, and this is on a 50% profit margin. All this from I guess I would say two things. From again, a company that was never meant to be a business at all. It was meant in both cases by people who just simply wanted to serve their community, and because of Bruce's fateful decision to open it up, and sort of to get at the diversity and the breadth of this phenomenon. I'll talk quickly about a very, very different kind of company, although oddly yet again, one that wasn't intended to be a business per se, although it was very much a business environment, and that's InnoCentive. So InnoCentive was started by Alpheus Bingham. He was a long-time veteran scientist with the pharmaceutical company, Eli Lilly. And what Alf realized is that quite often, despite the fact that Eli Lilly had a great number of highly paid, very highly educated, very talented, very intelligent men in its employ, it came across research pickles, thorny problems that it couldn't solve. And he wondered if, but other people know the answers. It's not that my guys are dumb, it's just that no one knows everything. And I have to think he knew the adage by Bill Joy, the co-founder of Sun Microsystems. I often say, you don't have to read my book, you just have to hear the one sentence, which is that no matter who you are, most of the smartest people work for someone else. Although that is as profound a thought as that is, and as simple, but still profound, it only begins to get at some of the counterintuitive profundity behind crowdsourcing. At any rate, Alf created InnoCentive simply as a way to create a network of scientists outside the company that he could occasionally take these problems to. And as it turned out, this network, it was very small at the time, let's say several thousand scientists, all from outside Eli Lilly. About a third of the time, they were actually able to solve these problems. So word got around in the scientific community. More scientists wanted to join, but other companies started saying, well, Alf, why can't we use this? Let's just make this, let's make it sort of a co-op where we all sort of can contribute, and we'll put up the prize money, and then these scientists can come and solve the problems. And that became so successful that eventually Eli Lilly spun the company off in 2006. So the InnoCentive now stands alone, and that network of scientists has increased to 140,000. But what I want to talk about in relation to InnoCentive is this idea of diversity, because it's diversity that is such a powerful force in why InnoCentive is effective as it is. Kareem Lakhani, he's a professor at Harvard Business School. He studies innovation, and it's no accident that he was doing his dissertation on open source software and how innovation emerged in open source software. But he, around the same time, a little earlier than I was sort of having my same thought of this is bigger than just content. He was having this thought of this is bigger than just software. And wanting to see how innovation emerged in fields beyond software, he found InnoCentive. And he's the one that determined that about 1/3 of these problems are solved. Now, this doesn't sound like a lot until you think that Procter & Gamble has 9,000 of the best educated scientists, PhDs, in the business. And when they're stumped, that's saying something. That's saying that this problem is very hard. So if 1/3 of those problems are being solved, that's quite interesting. What he further discovered, though, were two, what I think of as just incredibly intriguing thoughts. And the first is that there was a positive correlation between a successful solution and distance from field. And let me make that a little less wonky. Basically, the people who are least qualified are better even. The less qualified someone was to approach a problem, the better chance they had of solving it. And why this works is best exemplified by Ed Melcarek. Ed Melcarek, I used him in my article, and I went back to him when I was finishing up the book, and I was so glad I did, because he had gone on to become the most successful solver in InnoCentive history with 7 solutions. 7, again, doesn't sound like a lot until you realize these are hard problems, very, very hard problems, often labor-intensive problems. Ed Melcarek was studying for his degree in physics at the Super Collider in Vancouver when he had to quit in order to take care of family. And this is important. Ed Melcarek is representative in this sense, and I like Ed because often those with a pure love for what they do can't practice what they do for reasons beyond their control. And that is Ed's case. When I met Ed, he was installing HVAC systems in a little town about an hour north of Toronto. HVAC being, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. Not a prestigious job, not a plum research post at MIT or Carnegie Mellon. But what Ed found is, even though his training really was in electrical engineering, that's what his master's had been in, and InnoCentive at the time I'd only offered problems in chemistry and biology, that actually made him perfectly qualified, that by applying his knowledge to problems completely outside of his discipline, he could actually do quite well. And he's continued to follow just that. And the second thing that Karim Lakhani discovered is that in 75% of the cases, these people already knew the solution. So, and I think that this is rather stunning, and it really is. Someone reviewed my book on Amazon, and I'd never thought of using the trope, but it's the one that I want to leave you with today. It's from X-Files, and it's the idea that the answer is out there, was his headline on the review, and I found that to be really lovely. I mean, the way I put it in my book, and I'm guilty of sounding perhaps a little optimistic, a little Pollyannish, is just proposing the idea of what if the answer to our ills, what if the cure for cancer, what if the solution to seemingly intractable human conflicts didn't lie in labor that needed to be done or ideas that needed to be discovered, but they actually laid in the network itself, that they laid in the existing base of human knowledge. And the project before us was simply to better connect ourselves, to find that, just the way InnoCentive works, that the knowledge is already out there, and it's simply up to us, together, collectively, to find it. So, thank you very much.
I have time to ask you one question. It is very Pollyannish, as you call it, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, beautiful, colloquially. If you open up and you throw your problems out there as a company, let's say you use Procter & Gamble as an example. What if Unilever or Nestle is in the same crowd, seeing the same answers to the same problems that you have, and implement faster? Haven't you just solved your biggest competitors' problems?
I think in some cases they have. I think that what Procter & Gamble has done generally, and P&G is a good example in this regard, I think they're trying to find a new way to be competitive and be open at the same time. I mean, they've generally, and this goes beyond whatever they're doing in crowdsourcing. A.G. Lafley came in 2000 as the new CEO and said, well, 3% of our current products are developed in a process that employs people outside of the company. I want that to be 50%. I want to open up entirely. Or, well,
and then he fired 50% of the employees. Huh?
He did not. In fact, I pressed him on this point. I said, this is a way to fire your current researchers. And it's not, I mean, it's important to note, and we see this in lots of other aspects of crowdsourcing as well, is that act is, someone still has to draft the problem and put it up on an incentive, have back and forth with the person who comes up with the solution. Take that solution, apply it. I mean, opening up doesn't mean that other people take your jobs. I think that it's too often seen as a threat, and it is a threat. I mean, if you were to interview any stock photographer, certainly any that I've ever talked to, they have lost work. They have lost shareholder. you know, a Getty shareholder is certainly very disappointed. And yeah, there are, when companies do this, they are giving away trade secrets. Although certainly Innocentive tries to protect against that by, you know, they don't identify the company, but it's certainly probably very easy for, say, a Colgate-Palmolive to figure out that this is probably something that's being posted but you know, openness has its own rewards, although it has its own drawbacks. I didn't say it would be easy, I just said it would be better.
So maybe the conclusion is then that it's not so much the idea or the solution, but the implementation that's the real difficult thing of bringing out new products and development.
I think implementation of a lot of these ideas are very difficult. I don't think they're any less valid for that. But I often say that we know crowdsourcing exists, we know it thrives, because we've observed it in the wild, but we've found it difficult to breed in captivity. But we know it can be done. Just quickly, Dell IdeaStorm, I don't know if anyone knows it, is brilliant. And that's a case where a company that had every indication of doing it wrong, because they'd done it wrong lots of times before, did it right. They came in, they quietly, they slowly built a community, they were good to that community, they spent a lot of time fostering it, treating it with great respect, and now they are really in a collaborative venture with this community to release new products, and they draw on it to a great degree.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeff Howe.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you all.
Jeff wanted to do his appearance act again, but then disappeared to the technical stage. I don't think that was useful.